The Saints are looking to finish strong while the Bucs are looking to make Cam Jordan a profit and return to where they've been. And that's atop the NFC South. That and more on today's Crossover Thursday episodes of Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this Crossover Thursday episodes of Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen or review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho, host of Locked On Bucs at @JYarcho_Bucs. He is, of course, Ross Jackson, the host of Locked On Saints at Ross Jackson Nola. And you can find these shows 5 days a week, along with the everydayers. And we want to thank you for your support of the shows. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Talking about the Buccaneers' quest to win their fourth consecutive NFC South title coming up in a little bit. And we're going to talk about what's going on with the Saints. But first, Ross Jackson, this was over a year in the making.
Yep.
There were some shipping issues. There was some forgetfulness on my part, but a deal is a deal. And I am a man of my word. And so for this Crossover Thursday, I am wearing a Hill shirt that will promptly be given to my mother-in-law after this recording because I don't want it in my house. But we made a bet. You won the bet. And so here I am, wearing a Taysom Hill t-shirt.
Wow. Look at you. What a man of integrity is James Yarcho. No matter what they say about you, buddy, I will always say you're a man of integrity. This is very well done. Very well done.
I appreciate that. I'll get you at some point, just probably not going to bet for this game. But here it is. It's week 18. The Bucs, the Saints, last year, the week 17 matchup had far larger implications, but there's a lot going on with the Saints as far as injuries that they've dealt with and kind of the ups and downs of the season. Start off hot, then there's the downfall, and just all kinds of mess. But heading into the final game of the season, Ross, what is the biggest story of regarding the offense, at least with the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, I would start off, James, by saying that the biggest story for the New Orleans Saints really doesn't have anything to do with what happens on the football field. Right now, the biggest story in New Orleans, obviously, is the terror attack that took place, the Bourbon Street attack that took place during a New Year's celebration. And so, being at the facility on Wednesday, Darren Rizzi, interim head coach, started off with, a statement around what took place and sort of putting his and the organization's fervor behind the community and talking about going out and playing for the community and for the city of New Orleans and all these other things. And this is a guy that could be coaching his last game ever as a New Orleans Saints coaching staff member, because what we know about interim head coaches is that if they don't get the full-time job, they don't stick around with the team that they're with, right? They go elsewhere, and certainly no new head coach wants the guy that was calling the shots to be sticking around either. And so I think that's the thing that weighs in everybody's mind. So I wanted to start there, acknowledge that, and of course say I know James, you as well, that our thoughts, our prayers, our love, whatever it is that's most beneficial to the people that need it. We have it for and condolences for the people that were affected by the situation, whether directly or indirectly. So I would expect to see a very motivated New Orleans Saints team in Tampa. They're trying to figure out who their starting quarterback is going to be, James. They don't know if it's going to be Derek Carr. They don't know if it's going to be Spencer Rattler, but I would say probably 80% chance it's going to be, I would call it an 80% chance of Rattler, if you will. Because while they're going to leave the door open for Derek Carr, it just seems unlikely. And everything I've been told is that everybody would be shocked if he ended up making his way back out on the football field. But no one's saying it's impossible either. So they're certainly leaving the door open there. They'll see if they have Alvin Kamara as well as Chris Olave. Those are guys that maybe are more likely to take the field, but still not very likely to take the field. So we'll see where things go when it comes to both of those guys. But they want to be out there. And if nothing else, that speaks positive to, kind of the culture of this team. So I would say that that's probably the biggest story on offense right now is seeing who's going to be available, the potential continued development of Spencer Rattler if he's out there, and then of course the situation here in New Orleans that of course is going to bring some extra motivation for that team when they go out there and play for this city, this community, this state, and this fan base on Sunday.
Yeah, and of course I 100% echo your sentiments regarding the issues that happened there in New Orleans. It was terrible, and thoughts and prayers involved with everyone that was. From a football standpoint, I was talking to Evan Klosky on Locked On Bucs earlier this week, and it doesn't seem to make any sense for Derek Carr to go out there. You have a guy that have some injury contract guarantees that could kick in should something happen to him in this game. Doesn't really seem to make sense for the Saints to trot him out there and risk that, from a business standpoint. And then if Alvin Kamara plays, that is what it is. But as a card-carrying president of the Ohio State Buckeye Hater Club, there's obviously no love lost for me and Chris Olave, but from just a human aspect, I was
about to say, that's a weird statement, dude. Damn.
I don't want to see him out there and risk getting another concussion this year. I mean, it's going to be bad enough when he has plenty of time in the offseason to recover, and then he comes back next year. I'm still going to be terrified for him the same way that I'm worried about Tua down in Miami. These guys have suffered some terrifying head injuries, and I'm concerned for his well-being. I'm concerned for Tua's well-being. I don't want to see him come back in a game that means absolutely nothing outside of just the pride of trying to get a win for your football team and your teammates and your brothers there in the locker room. I would be terrified that something would happen to Chris Olave. I really would feel awful. So I would be shocked if Carr and Olave are out there, but Olave's a football player, man. He's a gamer. He wants to be out there, but that would scare the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, I think, whatever our personal feelings are around it, the only person that has to really make the decision is Chris, right? Like that. And that's the way the Saints look at it as well. I will say this, though. He's been an incredible story, like coming back and being a part of practice and being back out there and being happy and having a good time. And, I wrote a story about it over at LouisianaSports.net around, sort of the joyous nature of his return to the team and all this other stuff and kind of the feel good that it brought. And so, I think if he hits the field, I think he'll have a lot of support there. I think if he doesn't hit the field, he'll have a lot of support there too. I think both of those things are, whichever it is that he chooses for himself, the team is going to be, play it kind of, honest to him, but they're also not going to let him go out there if it's going to put him at further risk and further harm either. And so I think that, there's a little bit of a line to walk in the midst of all that. But, I do think that those guys, and look, here's what I'll say about Derek Carr when it comes to his injury guarantee. That's not a factor at all, because the Saints, he's going to be here in 2025 anyway. That $30 million is going to get paid to him anyway, I imagine. And so because I don't see him not being around anyway, I don't think they're too worried about that situation. But I think the biggest thing is going to be grip strength. Can he do that? Can he take a snap? Can he protect himself if he falls down? All those other things. Those are the things that they're going to be concerned about. They're more concerned about like his risk of long-term injury than they are concerned about that injury guarantee. If he's not out on the field, it's because he's not ready to be out on the football field.
And then on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, injury issues over there, performance issues over there. What's the
kind of
defensive side?
A little bit of injury. I mean, really the only starter that they've been down that they didn't trade away was Paulson Adebo. Really, it's been a pretty healthy defense. The question is, where is it? And I think that's the biggest story for the New Orleans Saints defense this going into this game is, will it show up? Will it be there? I mean, they've been awful against the run. They give up big plays in the passing game. They just have not been, they don't take the ball away. They got 2 takeaways in the last 7 games. They just haven't been themselves. Admittedly, they haven't been themselves since Dennis Allen was fired, if we want to be honest about it. And so that's kind of where that defense is. And I think the biggest thing is when you have a guy like Mike Evans, who's motivated, 75 yards away from his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard receiving season. By the way, Alvin Kamara, one of the reasons why we could see him back is 50 yards away from his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season. I could see the Saints, being, I could see the Bucs being aggressive, feeding Mike Evans in that situation, a win and in situation for Tampa. They're not going to take it easy on this New Orleans Saints defense, which has struggled here over the course of the recent weeks. And so I think that's the biggest story is, will they show up and what will it look like if they did?
Yeah, it's something I talked about on my last episode. The Saints are not going to lay down for this.
No, absolutely not.
I don't think the players are worried about what their draft stock is. And I think there's enough carryover from the Drew Brees era that there's going to be some pride on that side for something that the Saints have done and the Bucs are in danger of tying, and that's winning a 4th straight division title.
Right.
Saints have won 4 in a row. The Bucs and Panthers are tied at 3 in a row. Nobody else has even won back-to-back at any point. So there's going to be some guys on that side of the ball that says, I don't care how much we hate the Falcons, we don't want to let the Bucs get in the playoffs either. So it's kind of one way or another, Saints fans aren't going to be happy, but we're going to talk more about that Buccaneers offense coming up on the other side here on a Crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs. You all know how much I love going to live events, concerts, sporting events. I'm constantly talking on the show about a concert or a game I'm getting ready to go see. And the first place I'm checking out when I look for tickets is Game Time. I just used Game Time to pick up some concert tickets for a show I'm going to in February, and I used Game Time Picks. That's a new feature that Game Time has that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Then I turn on that little all-in pricing toggle switch, and I know exactly what I'm going to spend up front, and there's no surprises when I get to checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all one word, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you again for making Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs your first listener view every single day. Ross, let's talk a little bit about this awesome Buccaneers offense that has been able to do a lot without Chris Godwin, who started off the season
right,
just looking like the best receiver in the NFL. But top 5 in passing, top 5 in rushing, top 5 in points. Baker Mayfield is on the cusp of doing something that only Drew Brees has done in NFL history, and that is have 4,000 or more passing yards, 40 or more touchdown passes, and a completion percentage over 70%. And I went on a tirade the other day on my show because shout out to our good friend Kevin Ostreicher, host of Locked On Ravens. He's been talking about, why Lamar deserves the MVP over Josh Allen. And I'm like, y'all, Baker's got better numbers than both. Like, what are we, if you're going to throw around the conversation, Baker, if it wasn't for a bad record and a bad defense, I think would be in the conversation for MVP. But somebody else that deserves a lot of focus is Bucky Irving. And
yeah, big time.
What he's done for the rushing attack. And I think that's going to be kind of the biggest story this week is the utilization of Bucky Irving against this New Orleans Saints run defense, which is one of the worst in the NFL. You talked about where has the defense been? Well, the rushing defense is something that the Bucs are really going to look to exploit when you have someone who should be in offensive rookie of the year conversation along with Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. He's averaging 5.5 yards a carry. He's been absolutely dominant when he's been on the field. He's gotten better each and every week. And so the big stories outside of the season that Baker Mayfield is having is what Bucky Irving has done for what was the league's worst run defense, moving it all the way up into the top 5. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Mike Evans, 85 yards away from his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard season. And there's no Marshawn Lattimore there anymore. I think 5 is going to be pretty easy to get to. They were going to, whether Marshawn had been there or not, they were going to focus on Mike Evans to get him that record. But I think it's going to be a little bit easier without Marshawn.
Yeah, it very well could be. And look, I think Bucky Irving is really the big one to watch in this game for me. And apologies, I think I said 75 receiving yards for Mike Evans earlier. My apologies. But yeah, I think Bucky Irvin's a big one. I mean, look, you look at last week, the New Orleans Saints going up against the very, very, very bad rushing offense of the Las Vegas Raiders, which was 32 in the NFL coming into their game. Amir Abdullah, who I believe set his 94-yard career high back in like 2017, went off for 115 rushing yards against this New Orleans Saints defense. Just inexcusable in terms of what this defense has looked like. And so, or what that defense looked like in that game. And so Bucky Irving, a guy that's over 1,000 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns on the season. I think he's only got like 188 carries or something like that. Like you said, his rushing yard per carry average has been outstanding. He's the guy for me that I'm looking at that has the ability to control this game. I think that a big part of what Tampa's got to be able to do in this matchup is run the football, because you want to be able to score points. You want to be able to win this game. But once you get to the point where you've got a comfortable lead, there's no sense in forcing anything anymore. And so going on the run game to run this clock out and get out of this game, 13.5-point favorites. I think that's going to end up being the key for Tampa, or not a key, but that's going to end up being a reality for Tampa in the second half. And so I think Bucky Irving's a huge one for me to watch in this matchup. And so we'll see where things go for it. But man, I mean, between Baker and the way that he's been playing, who, funny enough, it's interesting. He had the MVP talk early on in the season. And now that he's finishing the season strong late, he's not getting the MVP talk all of a sudden, which is so curious. But I'll tell you what, one of the other big things for that Tampa offense that I just want to mention real quick is offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, a guy that I think New Orleans will be in on in terms of offering at least an interview for the head coaching position. They'll get an up close and personal look at him again after what was a super successful week last week for him and Baker Mayfield.
You're not allowed to have him. Don't even bother calling.
I'm just saying, Dave Canales did it right. He coached up Baker, looked great, jumped over to across the division. Could see Liam Cohen doing the same thing. And the Saints love Liam Cohen. They wanted to be their offensive coordinator a few years ago when they had to settle for Pete Carmichael coming back. But, that's a name that they'll be watching, I imagine.
Jason Light texted me earlier. He said that, he's off limits. Don't even bother calling. It's not worth your time.
Yeah, I'm sure the Saints will listen to that for sure.
Well, you and I talked earlier on an episode of Locked On Saints about Liam Cohen as a potential head coaching candidate. I still believe if he's going to be a head coach somewhere, it's going to be in Tampa. But this strong finish by the Bucs, potentially going 6-1, getting into the playoffs, and then who knows what the situation will be in the first round there. But it's going to be really hard to force out a head coach that wins the playoff game and wins a fourth straight division title. Wouldn't be the first time. The Bucs did fire Jimmy Dungy after making the playoffs, but of course, more to worry about that later on. I'm sure Liam Cohen will get some calls, but hopefully he doesn't go anywhere. Defensively for the Buccaneers, the injuries are still the biggest story.
Yeah, I was going to say the injury report did not look great on Wednesday.
No, Antoine Winfield Jr. still out. He was doing some work with trainers off to the side. I thought there was an outside chance that he could play this week. Looks like it may be more of let him continue to ramp up and be ready for the playoffs. And then, of course, Jamel Dean leave last week's game against the Carolina Panthers with a knee injury. So that is still kind of hanging over their heads. But, and of course, you're missing Cade Otton on the offensive side of the ball. Sterling Shepard is missing on the offensive side of the ball. But defensively, this is a team that since coming out of the bye week has allowed just 16.7 points per game. They have been a lot better than people want to give them credit for. Even against the Cowboys, they got down early, gave up 3 total points in the second half. Against Carolina last week, you gave up 2 touchdowns to Adam Thielen. You allowed just 43 total yards in the second half against Carolina. So this defense is starting to get it figured out. They are starting to play to their strengths a little bit better. Todd Bowles doesn't have all of the pieces that he would like to run a typical Todd Bowles defense, and it took him a little while to figure out the best way to utilize what he has. But down the stretch, it seems to be working. Of course, they haven't faced offenses like Detroit's or Minnesota or Washington's or Green Bay's that they could potentially face in the playoffs. And Washington's a very different team than they were in week 1. When the Bucs beat them in Raymond James. But that's really the biggest thing, is just continue to keep an eye on the injuries. And I don't think Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to be someone that Saints fans are going to see on the field Sunday.
Yeah, which maybe opens up the opportunity for you to get a good, evaluation of Spencer Rattler going up against a not it's still a top tier defense. Tampa is, there's no doubt about that, but a not full strength top tier defense. But look, New Orleans over the course of the past 3 games, you mentioned how, the Tampa hasn't played against offenses like Green Bay's and Washington's and Detroit's and Minnesota's. Well, I got good news for you. New Orleans offense is not that of Green Bay's, Washington's, Minnesota's, or Detroit's. There's no doubt about that. Last 3 games, the Saints are the second worst offense in the NFL, averaging 9.7 points per game. And the only reason why they're not last in the NFL is because the Cleveland Browns exist, having scored just 5.3 and some abysmal football over there. So they've kind of saved the New Orleans Saints from the bottom ranking over the course of the last 3 games, but even still averaging just 19.9 points per game so far this season after scoring 91 in the first pair of games this year. But look, the Saints offense just isn't now what the Saints offense was then. They don't have the players, and and because of that, they don't have the playbook. And so I don't think that defense, as banged up as it is over in Tampa, is going to be at much risk here against this New Orleans offense, outside of maybe the additional motivation of the situation. But certainly, when it comes to the talent, the execution, and the playbook or the scheme or system, it hasn't been there here as of late.
All right. Well, what does each team need to do in order to secure a victory in Week 18? We talk about that next here on Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players are going to score a touchdown and how many points each team is going to score. But you can do player props for yards, receptions, touchdowns. More than that, you can place bets on team points for a game, a half, even a quarter. The Buccaneers are 13.5-point home favorites over the New Orleans Saints with an over-under of 43.5. Meanwhile, the Chiefs are the favorites to win the Super Bowl at plus 360, with the Lions in second at plus 470, then the Bills right behind them at plus 600. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Wrapping things up here on Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs, a crossover Thursday, and it is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Ross Jackson, the New Orleans Saints, you just heard it, 13.5-point underdogs against the Bucs. What do the Saints need to do if they're going to win this game?
I think their biggest focus needs to be on anything but winning this football game. I'm kind of taking like a little bit of a cheap route here. I'm going to be honest, and I'll acknowledge that. But I think that a Saints victory, in terms of the victory that they actually have the ability to attain, unless they come up with some kind of a big upset here, it's going to be a major surprise if that's the case. And so for me, a victory for the New Orleans Saints probably doesn't happen on the scoreboard. And so for me, I think that like their keys in this game are going to be about finishing the season on as strong a note as possible, being willing to accept a moral victory, and then showcasing whatever talent they can showcase as they enter their head coaching search over the course of this offseason. I think, James, that this game is less about trying to win on the scoreboard. If that opportunity is there, you take it. There's no doubt about that. I don't care if you play if you win the Falcons on into the playoffs or whatever. Who's to say that the Falcons even beat the Carolina Panthers anyway? Because Bryce Young's looked a lot better, and Atlanta is anything but infallible at this point. And so who cares? Go out there, play, do what you can. But for me, this New Orleans Saints team is looking at being able to show what it has and trying to finish on as strong a note as possible to end the season. James, I'm going to be hosting the New Orleans Saints pre and post game shows for the team. This is going to be a weird week to do that, because really the entire focus for me is going to be about what took place in New Orleans, the motivation that gives this team. And really the big thing we're going to be focusing on in terms of covering this game is going to be really all around what this team can show in terms of its ability to fight, its ability to compete, and its ability to showcase what talent it can for its upcoming head coaching search. I think the New Orleans Saints have turned their eyes to the future, and I think that's the way that it should be going into this game.
Yeah, and you kind of just mentioned it. This could be a New Orleans Saints team that's auditioning for
Right.
a potential head coach that's on the other side of the field. Liam Cohen's going to get an up
Mhm.
close and personal look at this New Orleans squad, and it could pique his interest. You do want to ball out for that guy and hope that maybe he likes what he sees and he wants to make the jump to New Orleans.
Right.
Tampa Bucs fans are not hoping for that, but
Sure.
it is absolutely a possibility. All right. Well, the keys for the Buccaneers are pretty simple. You keep running the ball, you focus on the game before the milestones, and dictate.
Good point.
So running the ball, New Orleans is next to last in the NFL in yards per carry allowed. They were giving up 4.9 yards per attempt over the last 3 games. Slight improvement, allowing 4.3, but Bucky Irving is getting 5.5 a carry, while the Bucs as a team are getting 5.2. And over the last 3 games, the Bucs as a team are getting 5.5 a carry. So Bucky is far and away the best rookie running back this season. He's only gotten better as the season has continued. Keep feeding him the ball, and good things are going to happen. The first person that gets to him isn't going to be the one that tackles him, and it leads to explosive play after explosive play. And that's why he has been just so much fun to watch this season. As far as focusing on the game ahead of the milestone, we talked about it. Mike Evans, 85 yards away from his 11th consecutive 1,000-yard season. And in addition to that 85 yards, he needs 5 catches, and he's going to cash in a $3 million bonus.
Oh, boy.
So Baker is going to be hyper-focused on that Mike Evans gets the ball. He talks about it with the media on Wednesday. He said that record is important to him as a quarterback, as a teammate. It's important to the franchise as a whole to allow Mike to continue to grow, but the game has to be won. So you can't hyper focus on Mike Evans to the detriment of beating the New Orleans Saints, because the win is the most important thing. And then, of course, dictating terms. This is Tampa's game. They have to set the tone on offense with their run game. They have to set the tone on defense by getting pressure on Rattler or Carr, whoever the quarterback is. It's a lot easier to maintain a lead than it is to come from behind, right? So using the run game is going to help them dominate time of possession like they did against the Panthers. It's going to keep their defense fresh, and it's going to wear out the Saints defense from being on the field for long stretches. So that's when things are going to open up downfield for Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan. If you're sustaining long scoring drives and you're wearing out that defense, those 85 yards to Mike Evans are going to come just based on the nature of the flow of the game. So, and then of course, Bucky is going to start to burn tired defensive linemen and come away with big chunk plays. So you cannot let the Saints march down the field, get an early, easy score, and allow them to control the flow of the game. This is your playoff spot on the line. It's in your house. Make the Saints play by your rules.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right with that, and that's the way to control this game. Look, I hate to talk negative about the Saints right now, considering everything that's kind of surrounding them and stuff like that. But like this is just the reality of where they are right now, right? They're an injured, they're a beat up team, and they've had trouble being competitive here in the past. I agree with you that I don't think that this team though is going to lay down, particularly this week with everything that's been ongoing and everything like that. It's also, interim head coach Darren Rizzi. It'll be his final game probably on the New Orleans Saints coaching staff as a whole. And so they're going to want to play for him. The players love him and all these other things. But I agree with you, man. I think this is Tampa's game, but I expect New Orleans to show up and try to put up a fight. I think they'll try to, maybe raise the spirits of Falcons fans as best as they can, just to come up a little short at the end to kind of rub it in and everything like that. Like there's ways to kind of make this one interesting. I expect the Saints to cover the 13.5-point spread, but it's also because I don't expect Tampa to try to blow the doors off in this game. I expect them to get a comfortable lead and then run it out and do what they have to do. And if the Saints kind of close it up to make it interesting at the end, then great. That's exciting. That's fun. But I think this game is too far out of reach for New Orleans. And I think that's the way that we'll see it. But I expect them to compete. I expect it to be fun. I expect the division rivalry to be a division rivalry. Ray J games are always weird between both of these teams, so I don't expect anything less in this one. And I think the Saints are just going to do everything they can to finish strong. But I just think that with what the Bucs bring firepower-wise over the offensive side, the Saints won't have what it takes to kind of keep up. And if they do, awesome. It'll be a lot of fun to watch.
All right. Well, Ross, that is going to do it for this Crossover Thursday. I'm going to cover this back up. I've been
He's covered for the audio listeners. He's just closing up the over shirt there so that you don't see the Taysom Hill shirt anymore. But I commend you, man. I really do. I commend you for coming through on it.
Well, and then you know what? Pat on the back to both of us, because in the divisional preview, you and I
that's right
predicted the Bucs to win the division. Aaron and Julian predicted the Falcons to win the division. So they, nanny boo boo, stick your head in doo doo. They were wrong.
I think we nailed it 1 through 4 too. I think both of us had the same projection, right? Bucs, Falcons, Saints, Panthers. I think that's the way that this one will end. And yeah, kudos to us. We nailed it.
Yeah. It just shows that we are the superior NFC South host. At that, please check out everything that is going on Twitter. I am at @JYarcho_Bucs. Ross is at Ross Jackson Nola. Make sure you are subscribed to these shows on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we want to thank you for joining us here on a crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Saints and Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.